Hello everybody out there. Well, we're going to try a new format today. As some of you may know, I do have an Instagram profile where I post some work in progress content as I'm working on things. Well, sometimes what happens is I'll end up documenting a knife pretty thoroughly on my Instagram and then not really showing any of it on my YouTube channel. So I feel bad for you YouTube guys. And even the Instagram people that have seen it could benefit from a little bit more commentary and some kind of added material to see the arc of an entire knife build. So I thought I'd try that here. There's a lot of vertical video. Like I said, it's from Instagram. Still pictures, it's kind of cobbled together from that. So if that format bugs you, well, this one isn't for you, and there will be plenty of other content that's in a more standard YouTube format. But if you can put up with kind of the choppy nature of the source of these pics and video, it should be a pretty interesting build through of what was a really fun knife to make. So here you're looking at a picture of a Sanmai forging. A friend of mine, David Singer, came over for a week-long class. He brought some Apex Ultra steel to play with, and this is what we came up with between two pieces of 410 stainless.
Man, this is some cool stuff. Got it hardened without splitting the core. Got a good 64 to 65 Rockwell. And it's looking nice. It's getting pretty hard to grind. These Game Changer belts from Broadbeck managed to cut it pretty well though. Onwards.
Some details of my design process here. So I just took a picture from a straight on angle of the knife blade with my phone camera. And then I uploaded that onto my computer. I imported it into Inkscape. Then I traced it out and cut it apart from the background on Inkscape, put it on a white background. And then I used the Bezier curve tool and stuff to, and kind of scaling in the program to create a handle pattern for it based around the tang, sized everything. And then I went and got this neat Kumiko pattern. You're going to hear me use that word a lot in this video. Kumiko, not pattern, but pattern too. You get the idea. And then I'm going to show you how I sourced that and then put that on the knife. If you don't know, Kumiko is the name of a pattern family. Traditional Japanese woodworking patterns. They probably use it in metalwork too. I'm not sure to what extent. At any rate, there's a lot of it that you can find online. It's just geometric, tessellated, or endless interlocking patterns, which works great for stuff like this. So I imported that as well into Inkscape. I traced a section of that pattern and then made it to where I could just duplicate, click, drag out sections of it, interlock into the previous section of it, long enough and to the right resolution I wanted to fit into my knife handle design here. This is going to be an octagonal handle, wash style, but with a Western profile, so it has a nice flat side there with straight edges, convenient for me to engrave that pattern into. And then lastly, I created a set of handle patterns on one sheet in a separate document, two at actual size, because that's handy to have, and two at double size of finished dimension to use in making pantograph templates for engraving at a 2-to-1 reduction ratio. I went ahead and grabbed that in my GRS ball vise and using my GRS Monarch handpiece and a 90-degree graver. First I used Chinese white and then I used pencil to rub transfer the drawing from paper onto the Chinese white layout treated surface of this steel pattern, and this is twice the size that I'll be cutting with the pantograph. And I went over it as many times as necessary to create a deep V-groove for the pantograph stylus to trace. So here's the master that I cut by hand engraving with a 90-degree graver. Then I put a 90-degree stylus in the pantograph and trace this, and now I can cut synthetic handle materials. This is a 2-to-1 ratio, so this is half the size of the pattern with this particular Kumiko pattern. And the nice thing is that I can kind of
extend it any direction because it is effectively a seamless vector. But this down a handle should be pretty fun.
Here are the results on the actual handle material I use. The previous black stuff was just a test cut on some paper stone, but this here is some quality vintage paper micarta in kind of a really nice chalkboard green color with some darker layers. Beautiful stuff, and the cut went quite nicely. I just moved the table of the pantograph over whenever I was done cutting a pattern section to the appropriate location to begin a new interlocked section. And I went to, I think, 40 thou deep, I can't remember at this point, on that pattern. I had made the front of the scales have an interesting fit, reflecting the hexagonal nature of the pattern into the black bolster material, and here I am using my new die filer to get a precise fit against the black bolsters, which you'll see coming up. And that's right here. Everything is mocked up together. This is one scale, one bolster, everything flat for right now. Mocked up to the knife just so we can get an idea of how things are looking together so far. And I quite like how that cloudy suggested hamon of the Sanmai is looking with the understated nature of the color and the handle.
Yeah, I'm starting to get pretty stoked on this thing. Gonna fill up this Kumiko engraving with black epoxy.
I didn't.
And then I got a handle frame here. I'm going to put this with the other one on top of the handle frame. These will be black, of course. It's going to get chamfered for a wah handle, Western profile wah cross section. And then we have the Apex Ultra 410 Sanmai there. Well, 8.5-inch chef. Been slaving away on this project all day. Here's an 8.5-inch blade. This is that Apex Ultra and 410 Sanmai. And I'm making it an experimental handle. So drew it up in Inkscape, made a pantograph pattern, hand engraved, and then used the pantograph pattern at a 2-to-1 reduction to cut this Kumiko pattern in here, which I'm going to fill with black epoxy.
Nope.
I got these interesting fits on these black bolsters, and then it's going to have a black G10 frame that everything's going to be hidden pinned to on the outside of the tang there. And then it'll get wah octagonal cross section on a Western profile. Should be a pretty neat little knife. Today on Here's a Thing You Could Do, and also not on how to declutter your bandsaw table. What if you have a frame handle that you're putting together for a knife that needs a quantity of small pins of the same length and diameter, or maybe 2 quantities? What you can do, instead of dealing with each one of these by hand and separately, you take the rod stock that you're going to make them out of, and you go and make a jig. A very simple jig, mind you, out of literally a scrap of anything that you can keep pushing these through here and batching off exactly same length pins out of your 1/8 and 1/16 pin stock. Then take yourself some 1/4-inch round stock and make yourself a double-ended pin holder tool. These are just 1/8-inch and 1/16 holes, blind holes drilled in here, and they hold it well enough to where you can trim these at the grinder. And then as you trim and deburr them to length on the grinder, you just keep checking to fit with a micrometer or digital calipers if they fit the gap. And that way you'll end them all up, same size, everything. If I had a larger batch of pins to make, I would probably go to a further expedient of making a fixture for the mill or something like that. But this works great for cutting time and increasing efficiency on small batches of pins.
Here I've put the knife together as a dry run just to make sure everything's fitting well, see how it's kind of looking so far. I really quite like it at this point. Nothing is polished or in a finished state, but it gives me a pretty good idea so far. And that's, honestly some incentive sometimes to keep going when things get a little tedious. The hidden pins and everything, Made this handle tough to press together and pull back apart, but that means it's going to be a tight handle when it's done. And a quick shot of the mock-up on the die filer table that I had posted to my Instagram. Moving on.
Almost done tweaking this frame handle around a little bit. This is just a dry fit up, but I threw some axe wax on this vintage emerald paper Westinghouse micarta, and boy, it makes that pantograph Kumiko engraving pop. Love it.
And you can see that it actually matches the original pattern quite well. Everything is in spec and proceeding nicely. Between the time of this picture and the time of the next video, I have done a little bit of work that I didn't show anywhere. And basically that was hand sanding the blade, putting the final finish on it. But before I had finally etched it, I did some test cutting, and we're going to show that. I didn't have the handle on it yet to do the test cuts. It was a little hard on my hand. Next time I'm going to go to all the work of making a temporary handle. But yeah, check this out. I wanted to test the performance of this new Apex Ultra steel. Laren Thomas and some other metallurgist knife makers came up with it. And I actually talked to Laren a little bit. He said that liquid nitrogen wasn't necessarily required to finish the quench on this stuff, and that a dry ice and denatured alcohol bath would be enough to do the cryo. So that's what I did, and I finished it out to 65 Rockwell after temper. Good and hard, because this stuff is supposed to be very tough at high hardness. Phone books work great for this. This is an architectural metal supply catalog that I had chilling around the shop. And we're just cutting down through it. It dulls edges faster than even cardboard will. And it's kind of fun to make that little confetti and feel it just kind of zipping through the corners there. Also, it makes for an interesting Instagram post. So these are from the gram. Just did a little bit of testing. Again, not always easy to get that leverage, but the blade itself really had no problem cutting and cutting and keeping on cutting.
Edge still looks really nice.
And then I decided to cut some more. This is the most use I've gotten out of one of these catalogs ever. They send them to guys like me who they think are involved in blacksmithing, which sometimes we are, but they also think that we're going to buy pre-forged or prefabricated elements for architectural ironwork out of these catalogs, which nothing against guys that do, but that ain't really my bag. At any rate, wonderful cutting media, and I also use it as a series of disposable tear-off epoxy trays. A trick I learned long ago on blade forums for use with phone books. I can't remember whose trick it was, but I always liked it.
Everyone wants to talk about the brass rod test. Well, I like to do a silicon bronze rod test because it is so less déclassé. We're flexing it. Over here straight flexing, bruh. It is springing back to true without chipping effortlessly. You can see that deflection. And you can see that it has in no way stayed bent, and it did a lot of flexes. This is the Kumiko Chef, 8.5 inch blade length, 2 1/16 tall at the heel. We have 410 stainless clad over an Apex Ultra high carbon core at 65 Rockwell. Plenty of fun activity going on there in the weld transition lines. We have a frame handle made of black G10 with scales of vintage emerald paper micarta engraved on both sides with a repeating Kumiko type motif. This has Western handle profile combined with octagonal Japanese style wah cross section. Thin and light in the hand. Thanks for looking.